Would everyone take seats? We're going to reconvene as soon as the ranking member is back. As we reconvene, I understand that the Attorney General's people are comfortable with what the document is and the source. I'd ask for an additional 1 minute for the gentleman to go through, restate the document, the source, and so on. This is important that all sides know what is being asked, whether there are assumptions of validity, truth, and so on, and testimony that may accompany it. So with that, the gentleman from South Carolina may resume.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in keeping with my open file discovery policy, I gave him my documents. They have my notes on them. I'll go back through the list again. And I would also point out, Mr. Attorney General, there are several memos and emails I did not include because reasonably it could be argued that they dealt with something other than Fast and Furious. Although keep in mind, my question, what I said I was going to prove is that DOJ knew Fast and Furious and beforehand that gun walking was a tactic because the letter Mr. Weitz wrote was not specific with respect to gun walking. True or false, DOJ assigned a prosecutor to Fast and Furious?
I believe that that's right, that there were people who went down, one or two, I'm not sure, who went down to help with regard to that prosecution, that matter.
All right. True or false that Mr. Grindler attended a debriefing on Fast and Furious where his own notes indicate the seizure of weapons in Mexico?
That is, if you're talking about, I don't know, debriefing, if you're talking about the meeting that he had with the folks from ATF, I guess in March of 2010.
Yes, sir, it's March, and there's a note in cursive handwriting, Fast and Furious, and there was a map attached to that of the seizure of weapons in Mexico. And my point was it doesn't take a very good prosecutor to ask how the guns got from Phoenix to Mexico.
Yeah, and Mr. Grindler has testified and indicated that what happened in that meeting was that he was briefed on the operation, was told that it was essentially a successful operation, and no mention of tactics came out of that meeting.
All right, there was a memo to you through the acting deputy AG from the National Drug Intelligence. I can't call his name because I don't have my copy of it.
Yeah.
Fast and Furious is mentioned specifically. Straw purchasers are mentioned specifically, and 1,500 firearms are mentioned specifically. This
is a what we call a weekly report, and I've testified about this, and I don't know how many times. there are a number of these that come from NDIC, and just for the record, it's from Michael Walther, who's the director of National Drug Intelligence Center. And these things just talk about what's going on with regard to operations. Again, there's no mention of tactics in any of these. There's no indication that inappropriate tactics are being used in connection with the underlying investigation, and that's why these things were not brought to my attention by my staff.
Well, it mentions 1,500 firearms, and it mentions straw purchasers. And Mr. Holder, despite the protestations of some of your staff behind you that you're being treated unfairly, I never once said that you were aware of it. I said Maine Justice was aware of it. I suspect you didn't draft the letter on February 4th. My question is, who participated in the drafting of it? And I'm out of time, so I'll go ahead and ask the second question. After that, I would hope perhaps at some point, Mr. Chairman, I could ask the rest of the questions I have. But here are my two questions. Who participated in the drafting of it? Because the criminal chief head, Lanny Brewer, was in Mexico contemporaneous with the drafting of the February 4th letter advocating gun walking. Get that image, that visual image of a letter being drafted denying gun walking while the criminal chief at Maine Justice is in Mexico advocating for gun walking.
The gentleman's time has expired. The Attorney General may answer.
In terms of who drafted the February 4th letter, I mean, that is obvious from the materials that we shared with you, those 1,300 pages or so. I mean, I can't call all the names, but you will really see, I think, virtually everybody, if not everybody, who was involved with the Justice Department in the creation of the February 4th letter, so you could review that. I don't think it's correct to say that while the letter was being drafted that Mr. Brewer was in Mexico advocating for gun walking. He was in Mexico, and I think you're talking about a February 2nd email or report of, I guess, from the State Department that indicated that what he was talking about was the possibility of a surveilled delivery of weapons to people who would take them to the border and an arrest made at the border, and interestingly, on the Mexican side of the border, because the penalties that exist in Mexico for gun trafficking, for straw purchasing, are higher than they are here in the United States. And that's what he was proposing, not gun walking, but something very, very different. It was something that was raised but ultimately never carried out.
I thank the gentleman. I apologize. There's no